The mystery surrounding the disappearance of these children has led to the claim that while many children were recorded as have died, in fact, they were either kidnapped or were adopted by rich Ashkenazi Jews in Israel or abroad. My, my, my. My, my, my. So these children who we trace back where they came from, and we saw that they were doing tests on them to what? See if they had Negro blood. Their organs were either harvested right then on the spot, or the children, they were adopted by rich Ashkenazi Jews in Israel or abroad.
Staying focused for Jesus.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Staying Focused for Jesus. The evidence is just, it's simply overwhelming. It's simply just overwhelming. The stuff that you find when you're actually looking for it. So this is on the Times of Israel, and it's titled, this is from June 16th, 2017. And it's titled, When Israeli Doctors Allegedly Tested Yemenites for, quote, Negro blood. When Israeli doctors allegedly tested Yemenites for Negro blood. Blood samples from Yemenites in the 1950s were tested to determine whether they had Negro blood. Oh, really? Photographs of children showed their organs marked, and 60 hearts were harvested from the bodies of new immigrants from Yemen post-mortem for purposes of medical research, allegedly, in a project purportedly funded by the U.S. By the U.S. Funded by the U.S., huh? The dramatic allegations about such practices were presented on Wednesday to the Knesset Special Committee on the Disappearance of Children from Yemen, the East, and the Balkans, based on 20-year-old testimonies by Israeli medical professionals. So the very people that were doing these tests, they gave testimonies that they were testing these Yemenite children for Negro blood. Now they're going to say that they were allegedly testing it to test for sickle cell, which is well known amongst African Americans. But they're going to use a play on words and stuff like that. Now ask yourself, why in the world would they be doing that? The harrowing claim, which in some cases appears to be true, seemed to be indicative of lax medical oversight and permissive legislation, and not systematic, malicious, and criminal experimentation that some media reports tried to suggest. That's exactly what it was. The Knesset committee reevaluated the evidence, expressing dismay, but made no calls for further action, because if they did make calls for further action, then they would end up exposing themselves that much more. The documents alleging medical experimentation on the new immigrants from Yemen were gathered in 1996 to 1997 by a Knesset-appointed investigation commission tasked with probing the disappearance of over 1,000 children in the so-called abducted Yemenite children affair. Now, why are they abducting these children and then testing them for Negro blood and then taking their organs? Re-examined by Israeli lawmakers, they were catapulted into the headlines on Thursday when the Israel Hayom Daily published the claims on its front page. The story was featured alongside what the newspaper said were newly released photos of Yemenite children, one of which has the word spleen written in marker over the child's organs. It was immediately clear where the jarring images were from and what became of the children pictured. They end up harvesting their organs. The claims that doctors used Yemenite Jewish blood cells to test for sickle cell anemia and African ancestry appeared to be corroborated by a November 1952 article published by the Lancet Medical Journal. At the time, Israeli law did not appear to require consent for such a procedure. So they're testing these Yemenite children for sickle cell anemia and African ancestry. It says the claims that the doctors use Yemenite Jewish blood cells to test for sickle cell anemia and African ancestry. Now, why would they be using this Yemenite Jewish blood to test for African ancestry unless they know there's a connection with being a Jew in regards to Africa, what we call Israel, which is a part of Africa? God is good. God is good. The allegations that hearts were removed from the bodies of Yemenite Jews for research purposes were backed up by a paleontologist in 1997. So they were removing these organs because they knew that they were of African ancestry. Now, I'm not going to get deep into that as far as the harvesting of black organs, but some of y'all know about that. But the medical professional did not work at the hospital where the operation allegedly took place, and the original report source was described as entirely unconfirmed. So that's some of them right there. You see, they are of what we call the darker persuasion. They're more mixed. Some of them, as you can see, let's go back. Since the 1950s, over 1,000 families, mostly immigrants from Yemen, but also dozens from the Balkans, North Africa, and other Middle Eastern countries, have alleged their children were systematically kidnapped from Israeli hospitals and put up for adoption, sometimes abroad. But these are the people that majority of Americans and others support. They were doing stuff like this back in the 1950s. Now, 1950s, isn't that not too far removed from when they allegedly came into the land around 1947, 48? Oh, but they were testing these Yemenite children of who were said to have Jewish descent. They were testing their blood to see if they had sickle cell and if they had African ancestry. Sickle cell is something that's prominent among blacks, especially African Americans. But people are gonna try to tell me that they're gonna try to tell me about my people and where my people came from. And they're gonna try to tell me that the people that are over in the land of Israel, that those are the physical descendants of Israel. The evidence is overwhelming. And I get upset about it simply because the evidence is overwhelming. A person has to purposely lie to continue to hold to this lie that those are the people, the physical people. That's why I get so upset about it. Because it's like, well, why do you continue to reject what you see is true? That means you have ulterior motives. Disputed by scholars and seemingly refuted by probes, the case has kept resurfacing, not least because most of the families were not given their children's bodies or informed of their burial places. Furthermore, death certificates were riddled with errors, and most of the missing children were sent army draft notices 18 years after their alleged deaths. Too many holes in the story. They're trying to cover it up. There have also been cases where adopted children were able to confirm through paternity tests that they were from Yemenite families who were told they had died. Oh, but these are God's people, though. Seems like they got a lot of power to do this. The state archives declassified 400,000 documents on the affair in December 2016, but the long simmering controversy is far from being resolved as the families have rejected the findings of successive investigation, and advocacy groups representing the families continue to set up pressure for further probes. Wednesday's Knesset meeting was based on the 1995 testimony of Dr. George Mendel of the Hadassah Hospital in Rosh Hashanah, who described how Professor Fritz Dreyfus, a doctor of internal medicine, conducted a study with a team of international doctors. Let me repeat that. Conducted a study with a team of international doctors on the Yemenite children for traces of sickle cell anemia common among African Americans. So why in the world would they be testing for this? You think they know something that we've been telling people all along because the evidence supports it? One day there was a visit in Rosh Hashanah with a group of doctors from abroad, all over the world. Psalms 83. There was a well-known man named Professor Damascus. He looked at the Yemenites and thought they must have Negro blood, and that perhaps they have the blood disease called sickle cell anemia. So he was able to say that they must have Negro blood based strictly off of their appearance, which led him to do the test to see if they had the so-called sickle cell anemia disease. So they knew that these ancient Yemenites, and even during this time, they were what we call the people of color, and that they were probably of Negro descent. They were trying to see if are these the people? Are these the people? And I'm going to read another article that's going to even prove it that much more from their own mouths. So Mendel told the investigation panel 22 years ago. He said, "Why not check it?" He drafted students and sent them to Rosh Hashanah, and they will evaluate the blood samples that we took for malaria tests. They took another sample simultaneously and checked it. See, when you're giving these folks your blood, you don't know what they're doing. You're going there for one thing, and they getting your blood, and they doing other stuff with it. That's the pictures they had of the children marked where they were going to take their organs. Mendel stressed that the blood samples were not taken solely for research purposes, saying they were drawn only from those who came for a checkup, children and adults alike. He lying. The team discovered some sickle cell traces in a few children, he said. Professor Dreyfus, need to be Professor Doofus, was excited, and he wrote a paper in one of the medical journals, he added. They tell you there was a few children. However, the theory was entirely refuted by British expert Herman Lehman, who had more advanced hemoglobin testing methods, Mendel said, promoting Dreyfus to retract his earlier article. Quote, "And they already told the Yemenites they had Negro blood," end quote, he added. An article co-authored by Dreyfus and Lehman, as well as two other London researchers, was published in the Lancet in the winter of 1952 under the title "An Investigation of Blood Groups and a Search for Sickle Cell Trait in Yemenite Jews." You see how they word it? You gotta understand how they word stuff. They word things a certain way to attract the attention to the certain people that they are trying to relay the information to. They're just putting it in code. So if you don't understand the code, then you're not going to really understand what they're trying to relay. So it goes on, it talks about it a little bit more. But it's just crazy what they were doing. They talk about some of the things they did with the bodies. You see biological waste. But let's go check out this other article. Let's go check out this other article. So this is, as you see, is on the Haaretz.com. And let's read the caption. Children of the Jewish community in Sinai, 1901. Look at all these children. They look of the darker persuasion, don't they? They look of the darker persuasion. What is the name of the article? First ever photos of Yemen's Jews stunned the Jewish world. Well, I don't understand. Being sarcastic, why would they not? Why would they be stunned by these photos? Why would they be stunned? Let's find out. When adventurer and photographer Herman Burkhardt arrived in Sinai in 1901, he became the first person to chronicle this unique community's way of life. The search for the authentic Jew was a common pursuit among Jewish communities in the 19th century. Now, hold on. If these people are the Jews, then why would they have to be searching for the authentic Jew? Wouldn't they be the authentic Jews? That doesn't make any sense. The search for the authentic Jew was a common pursuit. I want to read that one more time. The search for the authentic Jew was a common pursuit among Jewish communities in the 19th century. Why would you have to search for the authentic Jew if you are the authentic Jew, if you are the so-called original Jew? They sit there and tell you. They're telling you. Many ask themselves the question in one form or another, am I really living according to the ways of my ancestors? Well, if you coming forth from your ancestors, then you would know. If it's allegedly been passed down, y'all know who y'all are, then you wouldn't really have to ask if you're living according to your ancestors. Because according to them, the records have been kept and, it's been passed down from generation to generation. They know who they are. But obviously they don't know who they are because they were searching, because it was a common pursuit for them to be searching for the authentic Jew, even though they already know who we are. In those years, a young German Jew who had just turned 30 decided to leave the family business and set off on a journey around the world that would incorporate two of his great passions, photography and the study of ancient and exotic peoples. Herman Burkhardt decided to use his substantial inheritance to rent an apartment in Damascus, which would serve as the base for his research expeditions and adventures. He had already studied Arabic and Turkish, which he hoped to use to his advantage. And that was him. He was a German Jew, allegedly. He was Jewish. Notice how they label him a Jew, but then they label right there it says children of the Jewish community. Then it says first ever photos of Yemen's Jews. Jewish and Jew is two different things. They're just trying to cause confusion. And you can obviously see he looks completely different from the photos that he took that stunned the Jewish world. Ancient Yemenite. Ancient Yemenite right there, as you see. Even before he set off on his travels, Burkhardt saw himself as a citizen of the world, a man without limits, able to reach places no European had ever set foot before. On one of his journeys in 1901, he encountered just such a place in the middle of the harsh and barren desert. He reached the Yemenite city of Sinai. On his wanderings around the hilly capital city, he was stunned by a group of people he encountered, members of the Sinai Jewish community, whose ties to other Jewish communities worldwide had been almost completely severed for generations. And that's another one of them right there. And you wonder where the Jews of the day they get that from, the little curl, because the people had curly hair. There you go. You see some of them mixed, and you see some of them are the darker persuasion. You see the little baby right here in the middle. You see the boy to the left of him that's of a darker persuasion, and then you see the boy next to him is of a darker persuasion, and the one that's next to him is of a darker persuasion. But you see all shades of from black to swarthy to tawny. Some of them are what we call physical Jews, and some of them are mixed. There's some more pictures of them. You see, it's what we call black people. They're black. Oh, they mean black people, man. They're brown. Man, you got to study. That's all I gotta say. You got to study. Black is a generic term. So these are pictures he took. They were shocked because these are ancient peoples that claim to be Jews and that they were black. That's why they were shocked. Because they were looking for the authentic Jew. Together with his large entourage, Burckhardt spent nearly a year with the community. He got to know them personally, to study and document their customs, listen to their unique life stories, transcribing almost every word in his diary. I would love to read it. I may even go look it up online, see how much it is. A lot of times, books like that, they cost a lot of money because they be trying to hide stuff. And they know that majority of us that are what we call black, we're not going to pay $100 or $200 for a book. I mean, heck, I don't even want to pay that much money for books. For real, even if I had it. And for the first time in history, he photographed them. The article he published in the journal, Unverified, included the spectacularly beautiful first ever photographs of the Yemenite Jewish community. And here's your related article right there. Yemenite babies who disappeared in 1950s Israel were sold to U.S. Jews. The images were nothing short of a revelation from European Jewry. The images were nothing short of a revelation for who? For the European Jewry. The so-called Jews, the fake Jews. After a break of thousands of years, there was at last a tangible sign of the existence of the Yemenite Jewish community. So they have been looking for these people. They've been looking for the authentic Jew, which they already know who the authentic Jew is. They're trying to trace. They're trying to trace everybody. It seemed as if the world's most authentic Jew, who had lived completely isolated from any foreign influence, had finally been found. So they were saying that the Yemenites were the authentic Jew. So even the Europeans that claim to be the physical descendants of Jews, physical descendants of Abraham, they know that the authentic Jew, the original Jew, is what we call black. Again, it seemed as if the world's most authentic Jew, who had lived completely isolated from any foreign influence, had finally been found. At least this is what they believed in Europe. Isn't that where the so-called Jews that are in the land today came from? Absolutely. The article so excited the journal's readership that the photographs were turned into postcards, which were sold and circulated by the thousands. See, this was common knowledge back in the day. This was common knowledge back in the day. Let's continue to read. Is this how Jews looked before the exile? So if that's how they looked before the exile, then how did all of a sudden change? I didn't write this article. This is Israel itself. And you know, Israel, they ain't gonna just let you put anything out. Y'all already know how they are. You say anything that's anti-Semitic, they gonna roast you. They gonna roast you. So they ask this question: is this how Jews looked before the exile? So you know they're talking about physical appearance. Are these the Jews of the Second Temple? Huh. For those who have been overwhelmed by the encounter with the Jews of Ottoman Palestine, the West encounter with the isolated and remote community of Sinai was even more astonishing. Because the Jews of the Ottoman Palestine, they were also what you call black. They wanted to examine the authentic Yemenite Siddur to analyze the differences between their and our biblical traditions, and essentially every tiny scrap of information about their unique customs. They wanted to study them so that they could actually learn the right way in regards to what the Torah says, so they could be better counterfeits. Oh, they sure look what you call black. It's a black people. Black equals brown. Black is a generic term to describe anything from swarthy, dark brown to tawny. Swarthy, dark, you know what I'm saying, like dark black, I mean. Like, you know what I'm saying, midnight to tawny, dark brown, and anything in between. We've covered that before. You put me right next to them, you wouldn't even know the difference. So we have another article here, and it says the Black African Kingdoms of Arabia. And it says the Himyarites, Yemen, Hadramaut, Oman. Yemen is one of the oldest inhabited portions of the Arabian Peninsula. It includes the entire southwest quarter, which possesses many advantages in climate and soil. Yemen was a colony of early black Africans until the Arabized Arabs, who are described in the preceding paragraph, gradually infiltrated it. And this is where you get your Ishmaelites. Your Ishmaelites, they took on this language, they took on the customs, and they mixed it. According to the Catholic Encyclopedia, the Himyarites, Yemenites, and Hadramautians are the same group of peoples as the African Ethiopians. How much more evidence do we need? They are genetically, linguistically, and physically identical with Ethiopians. This may perhaps explain the reason why the ancient Greeks and Roman writers believed that Arabia was a political extension of Ethiopia, Kush. Even today, the similarity is so striking that one cannot fail to observe the clear connectedness between the Ethiopian tribes who lived on both sides of the Red Sea. Encyclopedia Britannica states that Yemenis origin are thought to have descended from Mesopotamians who entered the region in the first millennium BC. Mixed bred Arabized Arabs. We talked about that too, didn't we? It says the southern group represents the southern Arabian stock, which is the original African Ethiopian peoples, and the Arabic of the rural areas of former South Yemen is still heavily influenced by the ancient African Semito-Cushitic South Arabian languages. The two groups maintain disparate genealogies and historical traditions concerning their roles and origins. The northern Yemenis trace their ancestry to Ishmael through his descendant Adnan, whereas their southern countrymen claim descent from Joktan, the biblical Joktan. And from my study, I don't think there's a connection with Joktan and the biblical Joktan. They try to make it, but when you actually study it out, it's not a connection. It's just something they made up, pretty much, to try to make themselves connected with that lineage. But the connections don't fit. So what happened was Ishmael, Ishmael ended up being this right here, where it says the mixed breed Arabs. That's where your Ishmael leading up to Muhammad, and then Islam. That's where all that came from. All they did was take on what the original, what you call the pure Arabs, they took on what they were already doing, worshiping the moon gods and stuff like that. So they mixed two things because Ishmael knew the ways of the Lord. Remember that Ishmael was circumcised. Remember also that Abraham preached the gospel to Ishmael. So Ishmael took that, and then he took what he learned from the original Arabs, and then he himself became an Arab. He became mixed, took on the cultures and the customs, and he took what he had learned from his father Abraham, and then what he learned from these people, and then he mixed it, and he also mixed his seed too. So you've seen this picture before, and this is a tribe of ancient Yemenite men. There's two men that's in this tribe, Mary, and the Mary are one of the largest tribes in Yemen, or at least in ancient Yemen. And you see they are what we call black, what we call a people of color. Here's another picture of some ancient Arabs. Another picture of some ancient Arabs in the area of Yemen. As you see, again, they are what we call people of color. Here's another man of Yemen, same tribe as you see. Another what we call black man. Some more from that same tribe. Speak for itself. All right, so let's get a little bit of a background. The Mary people, also known as the Al Mara tribe, are an ethnic group primarily inhabiting South Arabia and the island of Socotra. Y'all see it right there. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but you can go check it out. Also see the primary religion is Islam. It is Islam. Keep that in mind. The Mary are one of the oldest. The Mary are one of the largest tribes in the Al Mara Governorate of Yemen and in the island of Socotra and Dhofar Governorate of Oman. Mary group members are also found in other countries in the Arabian Peninsula, mainly Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. So it talks about genetics. And it says, according to Y-DNA analysis, most inhabitants of Socotra are Mary descendants belonging to the basal haplogroup J. So let's get a better understanding of this haplogroup J. So haplogroup J, M304, also known as J, is a human Y chromosome DNA haplogroup. It is believed to have evolved in Western Asia. The clade spread from there during the Neolithic, primarily into North Africa, the Horn of Africa, Socotra, the Caucasus, Southern Europe, West Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Notice it said the Caucasus. People try to talk about, oh, the white man came from the Caucasus Mountains. They're going by conjecture. So it is believed to have evolved, and I don't like using that word, but that's what it says, evolved in Western Asia. So let's get a better understanding of Western Asia, because they put these terms on here to confuse you. They put these different terms on here to confuse you. And some of you know about Western Asia, but some of you may not know. So watch this. Western Asia, West Asia, Southwestern Asia, or Southwest Asia is the westernmost subregion of Asia. The concept is in limited use as it significantly overlaps with the Middle East or the Near East, the main difference usually being the exclusion of the majority of Egypt, which will be counted as part of North Africa, and the inclusion of the Caucasus, what we call the Caucasus Mountains. You get that? That's where we get that from. So it said the term is sometimes used for the purposes of grouping countries in statistics. The total population of Western Asia is an estimated 300 million as of 2015, although the term Western Asia is mostly used as a convenient division of contemporary sovereign states into a manageable number of world regions for statistical purposes. It is sometimes used instead of the more geopolitical term Middle East. So what is Western Asia? Ultimately, is what we call the Middle East. Right there on the map, it's showing you. The little green spot. It's a play on words to cause confusion. Look at the countries it includes. Abkhazia, Armenia, Artsakh, Azerbaijan, Iran, Cyprus, Georgia, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Northern Cyprus, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, South Ossetia, Syria, Turkey, UAE, and Yemen. So you see, so here's a question I was asked. Is Western Asia the Middle East? Middle East Asia and Western Asia is the same region, but depends upon who is referring to it. The Europeans historically and Americans refer to the region as Middle East because it's in the middle of East, like China's Far East. All terms to confuse you. This would also cover what we call Asia Minor. Asia Minor, where the central location of the seven churches in the book of Revelation were in Turkey, what we call modern day Turkey. So now we want to look at the Mahra Sultanate, because this is connected to the Mehri people, Mehri, for those who are just listening. So it says the Mahra Sultanate was a sultanate that included the historical region of Mahra and the Indian Ocean island of Socotra in what is now eastern Yemen. In 1886, the Sultanate became a British protectorate and later joined the Aden Protectorate. The Sultanate was abolished in 1967 upon the founding of the People's Republic of South Yemen and is now part of the Republic of Yemen. The people of the Sultanate were essentially the Mehri people, or speakers of the Mehri language, a modern South Arabian language. The history of the Mahra Sultanate and its people is well documented and mainly written by non-Mari historians who prove that the Al-Mari people played a major role in the politics and the military of the Arab and Muslim world during the beginning of Islam. The history of the Mara tribe began with the formation of the Ad Kingdom by an ancient Arab tribe called Ad, who settled in South Arabia in the modern-day Yemen, Oman border regions where modern-day Al-Mara is located. The kingdom was a well-known nation which had connections with ancient Greece and Egypt. The exact location of the kingdom was depicted by Claudius Ptolemy in his book Geography. I probably said his name wrong, but y'all just bear with me. So Al-Mujawir stated in his work that the Al-Mari people are the only descendants of the Ad Kingdom and blood relatives of Thamud, who later founded the Thamud Kingdom. King Ad was the great-grandson of Shem, son of Noah. According to the Quran, the Thamud civilization was descended from their forefather Ad, and they migrated from South Arabia towards North Arabia. The Thamud civilization was famed for their engineering abilities as they used to carve entire buildings out of mountains. Some Thamud-made buildings can still be seen in Salih in modern-day Saudi Arabia. So now you should start to see some of these connections in regards to Saudi Arabia and these different areas. Salih, who had been sent to preach, according to them, to the people in the prophet Hud, originated from the land known today as Mara, and both men shared Ad as a common ancestor. Salih and Hud and the prophet Muhammad are the only Quranic prophets of Arab origin. Now, what they are trying to do is they're trying to link these people directly back to pretty much Shem's lineage, being a Semitic lineage, ultimately trying to link themselves with Abraham, so they can lay hold to the claim that is their right to rule through their religious ways of Islam. Now, when they talk about Arab in this sense, it's not the way that we think. They're talking about Arab, they're talking about mixed because of Ad. They're saying that Ad, he was the from him, one of the original Arabs. Arabs means mixed. It means many things, but in this context, we're speaking about mixed. And the reason for that was because you got to remember how God grouped people through nations and tribes and stuff. So when it's talking about mixed, when it's talking about that they were the pure Arabs, the first Arabs, they're talking about, I'm going to show you, they're talking about, I'm going to show you the mixing of two tribes. The mixing of two tribes. So they mention Ad. Now let's go look at Ad. So it says Ad was an ancient tribe mentioned frequently in the Quran. So we see right here, Ad is also known as Aram. Aram. Some of us are familiar with these areas with our previous research. So it says Ad is usually placed in southern Arabia in a location referred to as the sandy plains or the wind-curved sand hills. The tribe's members, referred to as Adites, form a prosperous nation until they were destroyed in a violent storm. According to Islamic tradition, the storm came after they had rejected the teachings of a monotheistic prophet named Hud. Ad is regarded as one of the original Arab tribes, the lost Arabs. So it says the forefather of the Meri people was a man named Mara bin Hadan bin Qatan bin Yarub. According to Islamic genealogies, Yarub was the grandson of the prophet Hud, which is, you trace it back, they're saying this is the biblical Eber. They're trying to make the connection again so they could lay claim to the lineage of the Messiah. And it says, and the forefather of the Yemenite kingdom in Yemen, who were rulers of the Qataban and the Sabian kingdoms. According to biblical sources, Eber, or who they refer to as Prophet Hud, was the ancestor of the Israelites and was the great grandson of Shem. And we know about Eber in the scriptures. So they're trying to lay hold to this lineage. They're trying to usurp and trying to get their birthright back because they consider themselves the firstborn. But we know that they sold their birthright. The only way they can come back in to the family is through the true Messiah, the Christ that they continue to reject, because they know what's up. They know what's up. So it says another man called Yarub, who was Mara's son, was a talented man who was credited with the invention of the Arabic language, Kufic and Arabic script, and the origins of Arabic poetry. Qatan is the forefather of most of the tribes in southern Arabia, which are called collectively Joktanite, and according to the Arabic genealogy, they are pure Arabs, whereas the Adnanites, descended from Adnan, are Arabized Arabs who took on the identity of the Joktanite, or however you say it. So this is ultimately what Ishmael did. He took on the identity of the Arabs, who they consider the pure Arabs. He took on the identity of these Joktanites and their traditions and beliefs, which ultimately led up to Islam, the modern day Islam you have, and then true Islam behind that is Luciferianism, with the ISLAM, I, self, law, and master. That's what it really boils down to. So it says the Joktanites or Qatanites are divided into two subgroups called the Himyar and the Kalan, and the Meri are part of the Himyar subgroup of Qatan, which makes them blood relatives of the kings of Qataban, Himyar, and Saba. Now, we've covered those in the previous video a little bit. We just bring it in so we can tie it together, we can make the connections. So when we start talking about these other things, then it all starts to make sense. But it should be making sense to you now. So it says, during the pre-Islamic period, the Meri tribe of Oman, and eastern Yemen were pagans like the rest of Arabia and believed in the worship of more than one God. See, this is what the term Arab really boils down to. The mixing of two things, two spiritual things that were not supposed to be mixed. You see, we talk about paganism today, but they were talking about pagans way back here. These people who were people of color were considered pagans. And a lot of these people, they did come from the lineage of Shem. Before the time of Islam, the Arab people believed in the worship of tribal gods, legendary individuals. You know, this is all familiar stuff. Spirits or jinn or natural phenomenon. Spirits, jinn, devils. The Bible tells us about that. The Meri tribe believed in various gods who each had a responsibility for one area of life, like wealth, safety, or the afterlife. Same thing they were doing in Egypt. It's nothing new under the sun. In Al-Mari polytheism, there were several important gods who were unique to their land, and some other gods were shared with the rest of pre-Islamic Arabia. We've read the Bible stories where they had these idols and stuff. Even some of the Hebrew women got these idols. Some of the Hebrews had got these idols, and they got caught with them. During the first decade of the Islamic calendar, a large delegation from Al-Mara, under the leadership of Mary bin Abyad, went to Medina to meet the Islamic prophet Muhammad. And during that meeting, the entire Mary tribe decided to embrace Islam. This is also, it ties in with Psalms 83. Because remember that Muhammad traces his lineage back all the way to Ishmael. This is they're coming together, conspiracy against Israel, conspiracy ultimately against God. It was conspiracy against Christ and his people in that specific lineage. That's why they joined each other. Before embracing Islam, the tribe was polytheistic and worshipped multiple deities. After the meeting in Medina, the Prophet Muhammad issued an injunction stating that Mary tribe are true Muslims and no war should be waged against them, and that any violator of the injunction shall be considered to be waging war against Allah. So they were familiar with these gods. So, by this time, Muhammad was the man. He was the man with the plane. He was the man in charge. So he considered them Muslims so that they could bring themselves together against God's people. Same thing they're doing today, because they knew the same way the Mary tribe knew, Muhammad knew. All of them knew this was a consent against God. It has to do with a spiritual consent. And it said the entire Mary tribe became some of the earliest adopters of Islam. But guess what? Muhammad got his same beliefs from the same place they got theirs from. And they got it from who they call the pure Arabs. Their action had an added bonus, as becoming Muslim secured them a political alliance and stable relations with the Muslim leadership in Medina. That's what it had to do about. It had nothing to do with truly converting. It was all politics. Muhammad told them that they can still worship their same gods, because they ultimately worshiping the same God. So remember, they mentioned Ad. Now you trace it back. It has to do with Aram. Remember that they traced their lineage back to Ad, who was the son of Shem, right? In the Bible, this is who it is. Judeo-Christian tradition claims the name is derived from the biblical Aram, son of Shem, a grandson of Noah in the Bible. So again, they're trying to trace their lineage back to that specific lineage to lay hold on their claim that is their right to rule. And when we go to the scriptures, we see the children of Shem, Elam and Ashur and Arphaxad and Lud and Aram. And the children of Aram, Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash. Now this is another lineage that they try to lay hold to, which is why they call themselves the one group. They consider themselves the pure Arabs. And it comes from Genesis 22 verse 20. And it came to pass after these things that was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah, she have also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. So another lineage they try to lay hold to is not only the lineage of Abraham, but also Abraham's brother Nahor. And that's why they, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that they call themselves the pure Arabs is because the mixing of Nahor's lineage and Abraham's lineage. Nahor's people, his descendants, and Abraham's descendants throughout there, they were, mingling with each other, which is true. But what it really has to do with was the spiritual nature that they took on. Instead of following the ways of Abraham, they ended up following the ways of paganism and worshiping these false gods. So let's dig a little bit deeper into this Yemenite children affair. The Yemenite children affair refers to the disappearance of between 1,500 and 5,000 babies and toddlers of new immigrants to the newly founded state of Israel from 1948 to 1954. Interesting. These Yemenite children just disappearing right around the time that Israel became a state. The majority of immigrants arriving in Israel during this period were from Yemen, with considerable numbers coming from Iraq, Morocco, Tunisia, and the Balkans. According to low estimates, 1 in 8 children of Yemenite families disappeared. Hundreds of documented statements made over the years by the parents of these infants allege that their children were removed from them. No death certificates were issued, nor did parents receive any information from Israeli and Jewish organizations as to what had happened to their infants. Widespread accusations continued that the infants were given or sold to childless Holocaust survivors in a covert, systematic operation. Interesting. These children were given over to Holocaust survivors. Conclusions reached by 3 separate official commissions set up to investigate the issue unanimously found that the majority of the children were buried having died from diseases or their organs getting plucked out of them. DNA paternity testing has been able to confirm that in some cases, adopted children trying to track down their biological parents were born to Yemenite families who had been informed that their children had died. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the issue as an open wound that continues to bleed for the many families not knowing what happened to the children who disappeared. They just got caught, that was all. The Yemenite community was well established in Ottoman and then British Mandate Palestine by the turn of the century. The State of Israel was created in 1948 and almost immediately began to receive refugees who included both several 100,000 Holocaust survivors and Jews who had become refugees as a result of the Jewish exodus from Arab and Muslim countries, which resulted in about 700,000 new immigrants from the Muslim world. Why doesn't it consider these Holocaust survivors as Jews? Because I thought the Holocaust survivors were Jews. That's what they say historically. Consequently, the population of Israel rose from 800,000 to 2 million between 1948 and 1958. During this period, food, clothes, and furniture had to be rationed in what became known as the austerity period. But they don't tell you this. They make it seem like they just came in there bankrolling and everything was good. They don't tell you that they were struggling when they first came in there. So if God brought them back into the land, then why were they struggling? Because God didn't say that they were going to be struggling when they came back into the land. He said they were going to have more than an abundance. Between 1948 and 1970, approximately over 1 million Jewish refugees located to Israel. Many arrived as penniless refugees and were housed in temporary camps known as Ma'abarat. By 1952, over 200,000 immigrants were living in these tent cities. Many of the complaints have common characteristics. Almost all the missing children were under the age of 3. They were the children of new immigrants who were less than a year in Israel and who arrived at the newly founded country in the immigration waves of those years. And almost all were descendants of Mizrahi Jews, especially descendants of immigrants from Yemen. Now, we already established who the Yemenites, they traced their lineage back to. Some of them being specifically from the lineage of Shem, and some of them, mixing their seed, being what we call mixed. And when I say mixed, I mean like mixing tribes. Almost all disappeared while in hospitals or when they were allegedly taken to hospitals. Almost all parents received only a spoken explanation that their children had died. The spoken message was only given to the parents when they inquired about the cause of their children's disappearance, and in most instances, they were told of their children's sudden death only after the funeral or the alleged funeral was held in their absence. In addition, the death records were incomplete, and many parents never received a death certificate stating the death of their children. Almost all parents of the children who disappeared received a recruitment order from the Israel Defense Forces at a time when their children were supposed to approach the age of recruitment. This sounds like some type of conspiracy theory, doesn't it? But it's conspiracy truth. This is where it gets interesting, to me at least. The mystery surrounding the disappearance of these children has led to the claim that while many children were recorded as have died, in fact, they were either kidnapped or were adopted by rich Ashkenazi Jews in Israel or abroad. My. So these children who we trace back where they came from, and we saw that they were doing tests on them to what? See if they had Negro blood. Their organs were either harvested right then on the spot, or the children, they were adopted by rich Ashkenazi Jews in Israel or abroad. I wonder why that is. Why would these Ashkenazi Jews, the same Jews who are in the land today, majority of them, why would they be adopting these children, knowing that these children were kidnapped? You can't sit there and tell me that they didn't know these children were kidnapped. They knew who these children were. They were either growing them up so they can ultimately harvest their organs later, child sacrifices, pedophilia, or they were, interbreeding with them, letting them grow up and everything, and then introduce them to somebody and they getting married so they can get that bloodline in them so they can try to lay hold to the throne also. This was all about. It's all about the battle for the throne, the battle for God's throne. This is what it's all about. I wouldn't be surprised if they were doing all of it. The Prince Charles, which one married the mixed girl? Her dad is white, her mom is black. They doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. The affair has been widely covered in the Israeli media through the decades, and so far 4 official investigating committees have been established to investigate the claims. So when we scroll down a little bit, we see public admission, and it says in 2016, after having re-examined evidence given to a commission of inquiry in the late 1990s, Cabinet minister Hangby told Israeli TV, they took the children and gave them away. We just saw who they gave them away to, primarily. I don't know where. The minister admitted that at least hundreds of children were taken without their parents' consent, marking the first time such a public admission had been made by a government official. This is 2016. 2016. They now they want to come out and admit it because they've used time. They use time because they know majority of people, they don't really care, or they're on some other stuff. They've used time to their advantage. So let's look a little bit at the sickle cell anemia, because remember, it's what they were looking for amongst the Yemenite children. And it also mentioned African Americans. So it says sickle cell anemia predominant among African Americans. With February being African American History Month, we wanted to focus our blog post on health issues unique or more likely to impact African Americans. They knew this way back then. So why would they be looking for a sickle cell trait in Yemenites? Unless the Yemenites, majority of the Yemenites back then were what we call people of color, black. Because the disease is still primarily affects black people, and specifically African Americans, also Hispanics, and all these different parts of what we call America. Because you got North America and also South America, and also affects those in Africa right now too. But more so, us who are here in America. My cousin has the actual disease. So it says one of these diseases is sickle cell anemia, and this trait can be found in about 1 in 13 African American births. So we see it says risk factors. Sickle cell disease is more common in certain ethnic groups, including people of African descent, including African Americans, among whom 1 in 12 carries a sickle cell gene. I mean, we don't think this means anything? Hispanic Americans from Central and South America, people of Middle Eastern, that's Africa, Israel, the areas we just looked at, right? Asia, India, and Mediterranean descent. So here we have another article. It says ancestry of African Americans with sickle cell disease. It says the inheritance of genetic disease depends on ancestry that must be considered when interpreting genetic association studies and can provide insights when comparing traits in a population. We compared the genetic profiles of African Americans with sickle cell disease to those of Black Africans and Caucasian populations of European descent. I'm glad they said that. They pretty much saying what we call white people. JPEF's lineage, and y'all know ain't no such thing as white people. And I got some more. I got some more stuff coming to you. I'm gonna show you that it has everything to do with DNA and a lack of melanin and epigenetics and stuff like that. But I just want y'all to understand what they're saying when they say Caucasian populations of European descent. They're talking about what we would call today as white people. So go back and read it again. It says when compared the genetic profiles of African Americans with sickle cell disease to those of Black Africans and Caucasian populations of European descent, and found that they are less genetically admixed than other African Americans and have an ancestry similar to Yorubans, Mendikas and Bantu. Remember, we covered the Bantu before, and some of you know about the Yorubans and the Mandinka people, but more so the Bantu in regards to what? The Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade was the Bantu people were the main source that the Arabs, our brothers and sisters, you could say our older brother, that's where they would get majority from the Bantu. The Bantu are Hebrew Israelites. Proven historical fact if you research it. So do we not think that God may have purposely put that there, and all of a sudden it just passed and passed and passed, and you have these people way back then in the 1947 when the state of Israel came about, and they were looking for Negro blood and testing these children for sickle cell disease? Like, come on, we don't see the connections, y'all. So when I'm talking about this stuff, I'm not saying this stuff to make something up. I'm giving you facts. This is just, this is more evidence, because some people still don't believe. So they still don't want to believe, then guess what? I'm going to keep on pouring on the evidence. And those of you who do believe, then you're going to believe it that much more. And here they are again, some more. Now these are in color. You can clearly see this is what we call black people, people of color. Now if you notice down here at the bottom it says Nabatea, the Nabateans. The Nabateans, they're the ones that were there before Muhammad, who Muhammad got his beliefs as far as the moon god, which is Allah. He got it from them. He got it from the Nabateans. So this pretty much speaks for itself. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. God bless each and every one of you in Jesus Christ's name. As always, stay focused for Jesus. And as you know, truth is not debated, it is declared. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If it was edifying to you, be sure to do your part and share it on all your social media outlets, websites, and forums. Your help is greatly appreciated to help fight this war and reach. Also, don't forget to like, dislike, and/or subscribe. Be sure
Squeeze it so tight, get the last drop, till there's nothing left, until we pass out. Keeping us around to clean up the mess and take the garbage out, but we'll be trash next. Create catastrophes to speed up the process. Depopulation, agenda, progress. News tell half-truths, hidden in plain sight. They know with it Kool-Aid, but gave us cyanide. They know we don't see it. They know you can't see it. What they've done to us. Open your eyes. Lemonade. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. It ain't safe for us. They made it so sweetly, so it will be easy to carry their plans out to lemonade. Lemonade. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. It ain't safe for us. Made it too easy while we're busy sleeping. They carry their plans out to lemonade. Voluntarily, they hold us hostage. Pay to receive fabricated knowledge. False education, standing ovation for my degree in indoctrination. Georgia Guidestones plainly tell us that they plan to eliminate us. Conspiracy theory, we see no dilemma as they quietly wipe out billions. They know we don't see it. They know you can't see it. They know. What taking us down. Lemonade, don't drink the Kool-Aid, it ain't safe for us. They made it so sweetly, so it will be easy to carry their plans out to lemonade. Oh, lemonade, don't drink the Kool-Aid, it ain't safe for us. Made it too easy while we're busy sleeping. They carry their plans out to lemonade. Oh, invisible ones behind the scenes, like Geppetto, pulling the strings. Master plan, dumb us all down. Eat what they feed us, try not to think. Carry on, nothing to see. As they continue with their killing spree, we wasting time on trivial things and buy what they sell. Even deceit, keeping us blinded, buying their music. So, but of course, they think we're stupid. They love to lie, cause they're deluded. We speak the truth, but then we get muted. Games and smartphones holding us captive. TV keeping the sheep distracted. Desperate to bring in their global system, so they resort to doing the drastic. Man-made disease causing our illness. Healthcare illusions curing no sickness. Get all our shots and death in the clinic, cause big pharma is big business. Mongering fear to maintain a lie that we need them just to survive. Brainwashed to keep their pockets lined, watching the blind, leading the blind. Yet they say, believe us, elect us, trust we never lie. Funny how they left that part out, they can't wait for us to die. That our vote, it means nada, cause they pre-selected chief. And to pay off the nations that they ransom you and me. Listen,